Hello, everybody. One of the main things that we see a lot of when it comes to systemic sexual exploitation of minors is silence. Silence includes cover ups, it includes bribes, it includes like blackmail, it is a structure that is super hard to penetrate. The sexual exploitation of minors by individuals in positions of authority, such as politicians, religious leaders, judges, and other elected officials, is not merely a series of isolated incidents. It is a systemic failure facilitated by a complex architecture of power, secrecy, and institutional protection. These predators utilize their status to target vulnerable youth, relying on a network of peers who look the other way and a belief in a get out of jail free card derived from their social standing. By understanding the tactics, cover ups, and logistical methods employed by these figures, we can begin to dismantle the shield that protects them and allows them to operate for years, often decades, without consequence. The primary advantage held by politicians, religious leaders, and judges is not just their wealth, but their legitimate access to youth. Unlike strangers who must lurk in the shadows, these predators are often welcomed into the lives of children and their families. Institutional trust as a weapon. Religious leaders in particular leverage the moral authority granted to them by their communities. A study by the Bureau of Justice Statistics found that approximately 80% of sexual abuse victims are abused by someone they know. Pastors and youth pastors position themselves as spiritual guides using counseling sessions or spiritual mentorship to isolate victims. This was evident in the case of Joshua David Kemper, a youth pastor arrested for abusing a 15-year-old girl who simultaneously posted anti-LGBTQ plus content online to project a facade of moral purity. Political and judicial mentorship. Politicians and judges often target minors through internships, page programs, and mentorship initiatives. The U.S. House of Representatives PAGE program, intended to be a learning experience for high school students, became the hunting ground for former Rep. Mark Foley, Republican, Florida, who sent sexually explicit messages to underage pages. Similarly, former Speaker of the House Dennis Hastert utilized his role as a high school wrestling coach to groom athletes, a position of authority that allowed him to exploit the trust of both the students and their parents. The grooming process often involves blurring professional boundaries, offering gifts, trips, or career advancement to create a dependency that makes the victim feel complicit or indebted. The ability to move victims and conceal activities is a critical component of these operations. High-profile individuals utilize sophisticated means to maintain secrecy and avoid detection. Private aviation and remote locations. The use of private transportation is a common denominator in high-level exploitation rings. The most infamous example in this network operated by Jeffrey Epstein, who utilized private jets to transport minors across state lines and international borders to his private island in the Caribbean. This mode of transport bypasses standard airport security and customs checks, creating a law-free zone where crimes can be committed away from public scrutiny. The recent confirmation by the Justice Department that President Donald Trump was mentioned by name in the Epstein files highlights how this method of transportation and secrecy connects the highest echelons of power to the abuse of minors. Compartmentalization and off-the-record communication. Predators in power often use encrypted communication methods or face-to-face interactions in secure locations to coordinate abuse. Former Rep. Anthony Weiner, Democrat, New York, for instance, used social media and messaging apps to send explicit material to a minor. These digital tactics allow for the rapid distribution of abusive material and solicitation of victims without the paper trail of traditional communication. Furthermore, the use of private clubs, gated communities, and secure government facilities provides physical spaces where the perpetrators know that they will not be interrupted or surveilled. A pervasive belief among powerful figures is that the rules of society do not apply to them. This sense of impunity is often validated by the legal system's treatment of wealthy and connected offenders. Desperate sentencing for the powerful. Statistics show a significant disparity in sentencing based on status. While the average sentence for possession of child sexual abuse material can be severe, individuals with political connections often receive reduced sentences or plea deals that avoid prison time altogether. Dennis Hastert, despite being labeled a serial child molester by federal prosecutors for abusing at least 4 boys, was sentenced to only 15 months in prison. His sentence was technically for banking crimes related to paying hush money rather than for the abuse itself, due to statutes of limitations. This legal maneuvering acts as a get-out-of-jail-free card, allowing the powerful to escape the full weight of the law. And then there's a statute of limitations and legal technicalities. Predators often rely on the delay between the crime and the reporting. Many victims do not come forward until they are adults, by which time the statute of limitations for their specific abuse may have expired. This legal technicality is frequently exploited by defense attorneys representing powerful clients. In the case of former Rep. Mel Reynolds, Democrat, Illinois, who was convicted of sexual assault involving a 16-year-old campaign volunteer, the legal process was drawn out, though he ultimately faced conviction. However, many others evade prosecution simply because the legal clock has ran out, leaving many victims without justice. Perhaps the most enabling factor in these crimes is the complicity of peers and institutions. The code of silence among political staff, law enforcement, and church hierarchies protect predators at the expense of the victims. Institutional cover-ups. The Catholic Church's sexual abuse scandal is the most prominent example of institutional cover-up, but the pattern exists in legislative bodies as well. In the case of Representative Jim Jordan, Republican, Ohio, multiple former wrestlers have alleged that he was aware of the sexual abuse being committed by the team doctor at Ohio State University and failed to report it. It is alleged that Jordan, repeatedly crying and begging one individual not to corroborate accounts of the abuse. This type of peer pressure, prioritizing the reputation of the institution or the career of the colleagues over the safety of the child, is a systemic issue. Partisan loyalty over moral responsibility. Research into voter behavior and party politics indicate that shared partisanship often trumps moral consideration when evaluating candidates accused of sexual abuse. A study found that respondents often considered an accused candidate to have questionable morals, but still better than any other candidate from that other party on the ticket. This dynamic extends to colleagues in Congress or state legislature who may fear that loss of political power or the scandal associated with exposing a peer. Consequently, rumors are suppressed, investigations are stalled, and victims are silenced to maintain the status quo. The final pillar of this architecture is the active suppression of victims. Predators use their resources to ensure their victims remain silent, often for decades. Non-disclosure agreements and legal threats. The use of legal threats is a standard tactic. Wealthy perpetrators can afford legal teams and barrage victims with lawsuits or NDAs, making the cost of speaking out prohibitively high. The fear of being sued into bankruptcy or facing a smear campaign in the media keeps many survivors in the shadows. And then there is financial hush money. Direct payments to victims or their families are a common method of buying silence. Dennis Hastert admitted to structuring bank withdrawals to pay $3.5 million in hush money to a victim he had abused decades prior. This transaction, conducted in cash to avoid detection, illustrates how financial resources are used to treat criminal acts as civil disputes to be settled privately. This not only keeps the victim quiet, but also allows the predator to continue their abuse of others, as the criminal behavior is never publicly exposed. The systemic sexual exploitation of minors by politicians, religious leaders, and judges is sustained by a self-reinforcing cycle of access, secrecy, legal protection, and pure complicity. From the private jets that transport victims across borders to the legal technicalities that limit sentences, every aspect of the system is rigged in favor of the predator. The statistics regarding recidivism and the low reporting rates of sexual abuse are exacerbated when the abuser holds power over the community's legal and social structures. To end this cycle, we must dismantle the get-out-of-jail-free card culture, eliminate statutes of limitations for crimes against children, and hold peers accountable for their complicity in looking the other way. Only by piercing the veil of secrecy can we protect the youth, who are currently being exploited by the very figures sworn to serve them.